What's going on, everybody? Today we're going over my waiver wire must-adds in week number 3 of the fantasy football season. You need to go out and grab these guys before your league mates do. Starting it off with Tate Atwell. Now, despite Puka Nacua leading once again in targets, I should say dominating in targets, he had 20 targets in this game, 15 catches against the 49ers. We might be looking at the next superstar in the NFL. I'm telling you right now, if you got Puka Nacua off waivers in week number 1, you need to be starting him every single week. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, at least until Cooper Kupp comes back. And I think his role is going to be huge even when Cooper Kupp is back in the lineup. Now, as for Tate Atwell, he still played a huge role in this game, getting 7 catches for 77 yards. He also played on more snaps than Puka Nacua, surprisingly. Atwell was on the field for 75 out of a possible 80 offensive snaps in this game and ran 59 out of a possible 60 total routes, which is a huge usage amount. Now, until Cooper Kupp comes back, I think both of these guys should be started on a weekly basis. When Kupp does come back into the lineup, we are going to have to reevaluate Tate Atwell's fantasy viability, but I think Puka Nacua, like I just said, is still fantasy viable probably for the rest of the season, even when Cooper Kupp comes back. Just have to see. Now, once Cooper Kupp does come back into the lineup, I think we do need to reevaluate Tate Atwell's fantasy viability, if you'd call it that. I think, once again, Puka is going to be a solid option throughout the rest of the year. You got to steal in week number 1 if you grabbed him. Next up, we have Romeo Dobbs, and I'm going to throw in Jaden Reed. I feel like everybody is going to be going out, jumping on Jaden Reed this week, which is totally understandable. He caught those 2 touchdowns against the Falcons and had more targets than anybody else on this team. Something that I did find interesting, though. Last week, he played on 53% of the snaps, and week 2, he played in 54% of the snaps. So just a 1% increase for Jaden Reed. He also saw a 32% target share in week 2, which is up 13% from week 1. So his target share went up and his usage slightly went up. The reason that I like Romeo Dobbs just a little bit more than Jaden Reed the rest of the season is that against the Falcons, Dobbs was on the field for 38 out of a possible 50 snaps, while Reed was just on the field for 27 out of 50. My concern is that when Christian Watson comes back into this lineup, I think he is going to be, without a doubt, the number 1 receiving option on this team. It might get a little crowded fantasy value-wise, so I do think Watson will be the number 1 and Dobbs will be the number 2. I think both of these guys are solid pickups this week regardless, and until Christian Watson is 100% healthy, I think both of these guys are fantasy viable. Next up, we have Tank Dell. Tank Dell saw the most success outside of Nico Collins against the Colts on Sunday. 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown in this game. He had the most targets on the entire team, 2nd most snaps played, just behind Robert Woods, who also isn't a bad pickup, by the way. Robert Woods is a veteran. All right, he's been in the league much longer than Tank Dell, Nico Collins, John Mechie, any other receiver on this team. Woods has more experience, so he has that on them. The Texans were huge on Tank Dell in the preseason and in camp, saying that nobody could stop this man. That's definitely carrying over into week number 2 of this season. Now, the great thing about the Texans is that CJ Stroud is going to have to throw the ball a lot. It doesn't matter who they are playing. Plenty of targets should be going around in this offense. And by the way, Dameon Pierce is just falling so far down the rankings simply because he has nowhere to go. All right, they are down in almost every one of these games, and I expect that to continue throughout this season, which provides more fantasy value for the pass catchers and way less for the running backs. Even Devin Singletary is eating into Dameon Pierce's role. I think it's a terrible situation for Dameon Pierce. I'm sorry to say it. I love him as a player, but it's just not a good situation. Next up, we have Josh Reynolds on the Detroit Lions. Reynolds saw the most offensive snaps in week number 2 with 53 out of a possible 66 and ran the most routes on the team. That's right, even more than the number 1 wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, even though Amon-Ra finished with more catches, Reynolds still hauled in those 2 touchdowns and 66 yards on 6 targets. Reynolds should be a good second option on this team going forward, at least until Jameson Williams comes back into the lineup. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a no-brainer number 1 wide receiver on this team. Once again, like I said, I think Jameson Williams will eventually eat into Josh Reynolds' targets once he comes back from that suspension, but I don't think it's going to be right away in week number 7. I think it's going to take him a couple of weeks after getting back from that suspension to really get into the flow of things. So I'd probably say around week number 10 or 11, then Josh Reynolds' value is really going to decrease a bit. I wouldn't go out spending all your fantasy waiver dollars on Josh Reynolds, but he is a solid pickup if he is available in your league. Next up, we have a quarterback sighting here. This guy was actually on our preseason waiver wire pickups list, Sam Howell. Sam Howell is going to be a solid streaming option going forward based on matchups. He is a matchup-based quarterback, in my opinion. Clearly knows how to spread the ball around a little bit too much, in my opinion. All right, Jahan Dotson, where are you, buddy? He is not getting any looks. He's running the most routes on the team. Pass the ball to Jahan Dotson, please. But anyways, back to Sam Howell. Okay, back to Sam Howell. He can scramble. All right, we know he can scramble. He can use his legs. That's why he's a lot better than these waiver wire options that you're going to see available, like Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy Garoppolo. He's much better of an option on a week-to-week basis than those guys just based on his scrambling ability. He's heading into some matchups where they are going to have to throw the ball a ton. At least you would think. He's going to face the Bills and the Eagles the next 2 weeks where they should be underdogs. So it should provide good fantasy value heading forward for Sam Howell and the Commanders. Great comeback, by the way, against the Denver Broncos this past Sunday. Did not think they were going to be able to pull that off, but they proved me wrong there. Next up, we have DeVante Parker, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Kendrick Bourne, but Parker was on the field for an insane amount of time in his first week back from the injury. He was playing in 72 out of a possible 74 offensive snaps and ran 18 more routes than the next guy up on this roster, Juju Smith-Schuster, who the Patriots don't seem to be the biggest fan of. Parker also caught 6 passes for 57 yards on 8 targets, which was just behind Kendrick Bourne, who had 9. Now, the Patriots have been really relying heavily on the passing game early in this season, and Mac Jones definitely looks a lot better than he did last season. Now, I can't lie, I'm not thrilled about starting any Patriots wide receivers on a week-to-week basis, but last season we saw Jacoby Myers was definitely a fantasy viable option on this team. I think there is definitely room for one this year, and I think it could be DeVante Parker, followed closely by Kendrick Bourne. So if you can get either of these guys on your roster, I would go out and do so, but I'm leaning slightly towards DeVante Parker breaking through as the wide receiver number 1 throughout the course of this season. Last up, before we talk about some guys that I am not running out to grab right now, we have Roshan Johnson, who I'm definitely going out to grab. All right, he averaged 8 yards per carry against Tampa Bay in week number 2, caught 2 passes, which is the most out of any running back. Khalil Herbert had 1 catch, I believe. Clearly, the Bears believe in him because they had D'Onta Foreman as a healthy scratch in week number 2, which was definitely shocking to see. And don't get me wrong, Khalil Herbert is a good running back, but I just see Roshan Johnson, the rookie, taking over this number 1 role as the season progresses. The more usage he gets, the more explosive he's going to get, and the more that the Bears are going to see that this guy should be the number 1 running back on this team. If you have Khalil Herbert, personally, I would sell him. I think he's at one of his highest points that he's going to be in the season. Could I be wrong? Yes. But I see Roshan Johnson, like I said, taking up this number 1 role by the middle of the season for the Bears. Now we're going to go over a couple people that I wouldn't necessarily go out and spend a ton of waiver dollars on. I'm not really running out to grab these people. I'd rather have my fantasy league mates grab them. Number 1 is Zach Moss. He had a solid game against one of the worst rushing defenses in the entire league in the Houston Texans. Everybody and their mother can run against the Houston Texans. His upcoming schedule is way tougher, all right? The Baltimore Ravens, the Los Angeles Rams, Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars, Cleveland Browns, and New Orleans Saints. Not many favorable matchups in there whatsoever. And the Jonathan Taylor situation, who knows what's going to happen in week number 5, all right? Could he be startable against the Rams? Maybe, but I'm not starting him against the Baltimore Ravens. All right, I'm not doing it. My league mates can take him and do it. That's fine. I know he was on the field for about 98% of snaps, which is an insane usage for a running back. I'm not falling for the Zach Moss trap. I'm sorry. I'm not doing it. And finally, I want to talk about Marvin Mims Jr. and Brandon Johnson. 2 targets for Mims, 3 for Brandon Johnson. They both caught long touchdown passes in this game. People are going to go out and spend a lot of waiver dollars on these players just because they see those fantasy numbers that they produced. All right, you saw that Hail Mary that Brandon Johnson caught at the end of the game. Brandon Johnson's not even on my radar right now, and I don't think he will be for the rest of the year. Jeudy and Sutton are clearly the number 1 and number 2 options in this Denver Broncos offense. I do, however, think that Marvin Mims over the course of the season could slide into that number 2 role right behind Jerry Jeudy. I'm not a big Sutton believer. You guys know this in the past, especially when Jerry Jeudy is playing. He had a savior game, let's call it today, when he caught a lot of passes late in this game when the Broncos had to come back. But other than that, I didn't really love what I was seeing out of Courtland Sutton. I think he got his first catch very late into this game. Nonetheless, if you're going to pick one of these guys up, it should be Marvin Mims, and hold on to him for later on in the season. Anyways, guys, if you agreed, disagreed with any of these options, if you have anybody else that you're grabbing off waivers, let me know in the comment section down below. Drop a thumbs up on this video. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.